So, how do pirates know they're pirates? Well, they think, therefore they are. Right. In the previous video, we opened the door to functions in R. Here we will try to build a very simple function that will let us draw cards from a deck. If you are as much of a fan of board games as I am, you ought to have heard of Coup. It's a tiny, card-based game of deception, excellent for parties or small gatherings. You play the game by drawing character cards from a deck with a size 15. There are only 5 possible characters you can choose, and each is repeated 3 times in the deck. Fair warning, I will augment the rules a little bit for this lesson so everything works like I want it to. Because you need to draw 3 cards at the beginning of the round, you may end up with 3 identical characters. Each character has a special quality that you can use to defeat your opponent, and since nobody but you knows which cards you drew, you can lie about having a character in your possession. The characters are the Duke, the Assassin, the Captain, the Ambassador, and the Contessa. Right, this information will suffice for building our card drawing function, and if you want to learn a little bit more about Coup, you can find a link to more information in the resources for the lesson. Okay. First, we need a deck. We already know how to make character vectors, which is exactly what we need in this case, so let's create a vector with all 5 characters. Fantastic. Let's check if everything is okay by printing our deck. Okay, we have all 5 characters lined up in here. Now, let's draw 3 cards from it. There's a function that helps us do that. It's called sample, and it takes 2 arguments. As usual, the data you want to sample from and the number of elements you want to sample, called size. Let's see if this works. I want to draw 3 cards from our deck, so I will type sample, deck, size equals 3. From what we have learned about functions so far, you know that you can omit the name of the size argument if you want, and as long as you place your value where R has ordered the argument in the function, you will be okay. Okay, let's run that. Great, we got 3 different characters. But aren't we forgetting something? We might be forgetting that each character is repeated 3 times in the deck, so in a real game, we may end up getting up to 3 identical characters when we draw 3 cards. Okay, let's sample our deck a few more times and see if this will happen at all. Just rerun the line we typed several times. Nope, no, we don't get any repeating characters. Huh. Okay, I know why this happens. This happens because the function is actually prohibiting repetition by default. Sample takes a 3rd optional argument actually, and it's called replace. To understand replace, imagine the following. You are drawing cards from a hat. You have lost all other cards from your deck apart from the 5 characters. So, you don't have any cards that are repeating. To play the game, you have decided that the best practice would be to draw a card, write down the character you got, then return the card to the hat and draw again. This repeats until you build your hand of 3 characters. So, even though cards are missing from your deck, you still get the chance to draw identical characters. Well, what the default setting of replace does is to set aside any character you draw so you cannot draw it again. This is avoided easily by changing the value of replace to true instead of its default false. This way, it will return any sampled characters back into the hat and you would be able to draw the same characters out again. Okay, let's try setting replace to true. I'll go back to the sampling function and just add replace equals as the 3rd argument with a value of true. Run that for a couple of times. And there you have it. There it is. Now you can get repeating characters. Fantastic. Okay, let's save this result to a variable called hand. Now when I call hand, it will give me the result of our sampling function. Let's try that. There you go, it works. Excellent. Well, you can give yourself a very, very good pat on the back because you just coded your way through your first R simulation. Good job. Okay, let's try and just get a different hand. Call hand again. Oh, it's the same values as before. Okay, maybe call hand again one more time. No. Okay, I think we have a problem. Every time I call hand, it gives me the same characters I drew initially. This is because R doesn't rerun the sample function every time we call hand. Okay, I see what's happening. We have given hand a set of values that's the result of the first time we ran sample. And this is what it stores. It will not change, no matter how many times we call it. Okay, so what do we do to get past this? That's right. We will create a function called draw that will sample 3 characters from the deck every time we call on that function. This isn't scary at all, I promise. In fact, you can think of functions as just another type of object in R, but instead of data, they contain an R command. Does that make sense? Great. Right, so the architecture of a function is simple. It needs a name, a body of code, and arguments. Because we are in the very beginning, I will not burden you with too much information about arguments, but let's look at the body of the code, that's important. To build a function, we will use the function. It looks like this. Draw, that's the name we want our function to have, less than minus, function, parentheses followed by braces. We also call that curly brackets. Once we fill out the space between the braces with code, calling draw will execute whatever body of code we've given the function. Pretty simple, right? Let's try it. So, we want our function to create our deck of cards each time we call it, then we want it to sample 3 cards from it with the possibility of repetition. All we need to do then is just collect the scattered pieces of code that do those individual actions and place them inside the braces. Like this. This creates our deck. This samples from it, and let's just add a line that says print hand so we see what we actually drew. Check if everything is enclosed within the curly brackets. It is fantastic. Okay, let's run this selection first so we create the draw function itself. Alright, it's already in our environment, great. Let's call on it a couple of times and see if it works. Don't forget that this is a function, so to execute it, you actually need to call it with the empty parentheses after the name, like this. If you don't add those parentheses, R will just output the code as it is defined in the function, and not super useful. But our draw function works like a charm. Really, really excellent work, everybody. Alright, you did your first simulation, and you created your first function today. That is huge stuff. Next time we revisit the topic of constructing a function, we will talk about arguments and everything will be a lot more advanced. Keep the excitement going and don't forget to practice with the exercises for this section. It will really, really make things sink in. Okay, thanks for watching and hopefully thanks for coding, and I'll see you in the next lesson.